Well, we thank you all for your kind attendance and presence here this morning. We're very glad for all of your attendance here with us. And we hope that if you are visiting with us, you will find us to be a group that not only stands for those things which are true from the Scriptures, but also is a warm and caring and considerate group. We're very glad for your attendance, and if you're visiting with us, if you will fill out a visitor card in the article that is in the foyer and just keep the article and follow along by taking notes this morning. This morning, our sermon's topic is entitled 4 Paradigm Shifts or 4 Paradigm Contrasts. We'll be looking at 4 paradigm contrasts. Now, granted, a number of those in this audience knows what that means, but there may be some that are unfamiliar with the word paradigm. The word paradigm, in one sense, is a framework or a set of understanding things, or the basic assumptions of something, the basic ways of thinking in a certain group. For example, if you have a certain type of industry, you have a certain methodology that is commonly accepted by the members of those groups. If it's an automotive building industry, there's a certain method or frameworks that are part of their paradigm. If it's a business model, you have certain things that are part of their paradigm or their framework. So what's the point of the lesson to say that we need paradigm contrasts in the world in which we live in? The point of the lesson this morning is that some people need to have a contrast in their hearts or in their minds. They need to have a contrast to the preconceived indoctrinations or the misconceptions that people have about basic biblical things or ideas. The 4 paradigms or contrasts that need to be discussed in this lesson are just a few of the ones that will help one understand God's perspective. And so when we look at the ones that we're going to be looking at, the 4 that we will look at this morning, we're going to be looking at contrasting paradigms. The idea is that the religious world will say one thing, but what does God really say about that? Or maybe not even the religious world as it is, but as you are communicating the gospel to anybody you may meet, whether an atheist, an agnostic, or someone from a denomination, what could we tell them that is in contrast to their paradigm, to their framework, to their understanding? There are so many ways in which our paradigm contrasts or is different from the paradigm of the world. And the one we'll discuss at the end is the permission paradigm, because it is known that we'll discuss this at the end because most children of God can exercise an exhaustive explanation of this comfortably. And so the permission paradigm we'll just briefly discuss at the end, since most here know this. But we will go now to talk about the universal body as being a collection of individuals and not congregations. We begin with this paradigm this morning. When we look at the universal body as being a collection of individuals, we're looking at the idea of the church at large as being every individual that's a Christian here in this assembly, along with every other Christian everywhere across the world. When they're baptized, they become part of the universal body. The minute they're baptized and come up out of the water, they're part of the universal body. And so that is a paradigm we believe. That is a paradigm, however, though, that is not as much concern to some, because they simply say, oh, well, we're just another denomination. They say, oh, they're the Church of Christ, they're just another denomination, when we're not. And some people want to think that. There's a billboard in Arkansas that lists 8 to 10 churches of Christ, and it says the such and such Church of Christ, this Church of Christ, this Church of Christ, and it's on the billboard, and it says, the churches of Christ salute you. That's denominationalism, to say all those groups together are the Church of Christ. It's an idea of saying that those 5 to 10 local church groups are all what constitutes the local church. Evidently, that's to remind a viewer of the billboard that when you collect all the local churches, well, there you have it, the universal body of the church. That's not what it is. I don't assemble with any of those church groups on the billboard. And that statement reflects error regarding the phrase, the churches of Christ salute you. For the universal church is made up of individuals. It is never made up of churches. Going back to those charts that we saw back in our youth, it's made up of individuals. The universal church is the one true church, Ephesians chapter 2. For there is one Lord, one faith, one hope, one baptism, one Father of us all, who is over all and in us all. There is one true church. There is one body. But to collate all the local churches and say that's the church is to make a Church of Christ denomination. The saved are added to the body. The child of God becomes active in the universal body apart from any local church the very moment she or he is baptized. One isn't immersed into a local church. They're resurrected through Christ into his uniting of his likeness, thereby needing the church, but not aligning with any local church until they place their membership with one of their choosing. Only God determines the condition of the church. Revelation chapter 1 through 3 says there are 7 very different churches in Asia Minor, and only God could remove the lampstands. And in reality, in the spiritual realm, if you look at that chapter, only God walks amid the lampstands. It's not us. Only he knows what's in the mind of that. Only God is aware of the souls within's internal health and their contingency there. Thus, there is no coalition of all the churches added up to make the universal church. The church at large is all the Christians everywhere, dead, alive, or in any time zone. Paul, he's part of the universal church. Paul is a Christian, but he's not associated with any American church at all. But he's a Christian, he's part of the church. A brother who lives in China or Ethiopia or Guam, they're part of the universal body. And they're not part of a denomination. So therefore, this paradigm, this framework by which the world needs a contrast to what they believe, is so different from the way the world thinks about it. They say Methodist Church, Methodist Church, Methodist Church. Well, they're all that denomination. Baptist Church, Baptist Church, Baptist Church. They're all the denomination. Well, so we take all the churches of Christ, add them all up, because they got a sign too. They must be all a denomination. That's not how this works. And so we need to remember how to define our terms and how to be able to teach this to the lost world. Here's a second paradigm that has absolutely nothing to do with that paradigm, although if you want to study more about that, there's an article in the bulletin. Our second paradigm is the created fully human paradigm, one that a lot of Protestants don't even embrace this paradigm. There are a lot of Protestants in Protestant religion that believe we evolved. They will say we started out in some form of evolution. They will say, yes, man was made on day 6, but we evolved to get there. I don't believe that. I believe man was made fully human, that macroevolution and microevolution are wrong. When you look at the idea of small changes within a species, I get that, like a horse or a dog changing small little subset things within, thus having different dog breeds and horse breeds. I get that. I understand that. But what I'm saying is we didn't evolve from an amoeba that turned into a fish, that turned into a monkey, that turned into a man. We didn't do that. That's just out and out false. Yet many sing the song within their hearts, you are a human animal. You are a very special breed. You've heard this song, haven't you? You are a human animal. You are a very special breed. For you are the only animal that can think, that can reason, that can read. Well, that's false. I'm not an animal and neither are you. I get the premise of that song to basically say we're different from the animals, but we're not a human animal. We're not animal at all. We actually are created fully human, not animalistically human. We might even say when sin came upon the camp within the mind of Adam and Eve, that our levels of the mind digressed and not evolved. While our brain can use a 2 to 4% capacity at any given time, it is used independently at any given time. However, Adam named all the animals at a very rapid pace and very quickly. We see him naming them all. As far as we know, his names remain to this day. I know he didn't use the binomial nomenclature of Linnaeus. I'm aware that he didn't use the taxonomy of animals. I get that he didn't use the classifications that we use today. But for all intents and purposes, he named them. He gave the dog the name dog, the elephant the name elephant, and the platypus the name platypus, in whatever language was given at that time. So he did this as a very highly intelligent man that very well may have had his brain capacity actually been reduced when he came to the choice of the fruit and sin and chose sin and chose the forbidden fruit and ate of that tree that gave him the awareness of evil apart from the knowledge of good that God had created him with. We didn't evolve, brethren. We as a sort digressed. Even the thermodynamical principles of life show male and female go from birth unto deteriorating unto death. Many need to know wholeheartedly to embrace the idea that we are created fully human, not partially human, fully human. For in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and the evening and the morning were the first day, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And when it came to the sixth day, he saw that the creation that he made was not just good, but very good. For in it he created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Genesis 1:27. He made us special. He may namely have observed that animals are good, but we are the very good part of the species of his mind. As the crowning creative achievement, he did dub the human species as very good. We are fully human and have always been fully human. This needs to be resounded clearly. We didn't evolve and we're not evolving. It is not more advanced to say we are getting more and more advanced. We are not evolving. We are at a state and condition wherein we once were able to eat from the tree of life and live forever. Now we've had that dismissed and have to wait until heaven to receive the tree of life. So we are not evolving or getting better. The society in which we live in even has it backwards one step further. The society in which we live in says we're evolving into becoming more and more astute individuals in the mind that say it shouldn't just be man and woman together. They say, oh, it's more advanced for one to choose to live with homosexuality or transgenderism, that it's more cultured to accept that. Well, that's not true. From the beginning, man saw and God saw that man alone or man with beast was unsuitable companionship. Now in our society, we have people dressing up as cats and beasts. From the beginning, God saw the perfect complement to man was his woman, Eve, created close to his heart. Eve was not created by his toes so he could stomp on her, nor was Eve created from his lips so he could tell her what to say. She was taken from Adam's rib close to his heart, so she could be his complement there, so that he and she could work together. Eve was not a man, Eve was a woman. Adam was a man, and the plan of God was one man for one woman for life. If the LGBTQ plus community had a mantra for over a century in the disparaging term department, it would be calling the family unit breeders. That is an animalistic term, and it's meant not only to deride, but to mock God's commandment to be ye fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. That can properly only be done with a man and woman and not in any other retrofitted body. Romans chapter 1 and chapter 2. I was once in a hospital. We'll just use a levity story for a minute. I was once in a hospital, and a guy came up to me, and he saw me kind of down and out. I was kind of hunched over, and he was one of the male nurses. And he says, hey, where are you going? Who are you going in the hospital to see? And I told him, I said, I've got someone in neonatal ICU. It's pretty sad. And he says, you're a dad? I go, yeah, I'm a dad. And he asked who I was visiting, and I told him, and he looked like he was about to give me a high five and go give me a chocolate cigar from the gift shop. Someone I never met before. He said, whoa, you're now a dad. Don't be discouraged. We've got good doctors here. Having a child with your wife is a special type of love. It's one that means you're a creator. In a sense, we're very like God. In a sense, we're very much made in his image and creative likeness. My level of fatherhood, as they say, was anteed up after that. I came in and said, hey, everybody, how we doing? And I was a little more cheery. I smiled and said, yes, sir, I see you're right. My child healed in neonatal ICU and now is a healthy young one. In fact, I'm happy to know I'm part in creation, and now, like God, I'm going to try to do my part to sustain and raise not up my children via the provocation of wrath, but nurture and admonition on the ways of the Lord. We are fully human, and have always been fully human. And this needs to be resounded clearly. We didn't evolve and we're not evolving. And when society says digression is evolution, they've even got evolution mixed up as to what the definition of evolution is. Evolution isn't becoming lesser and becoming lesser of something. In their theory and their touting, we're supposed to become superior. We are fully human and have not evolved, but as a culture, we're digressing. God said to multiply and subdue the earth, not be given over to a reprobate mind or to choose things to do carnally and without appreciation for the husband and wife structure. Okay, third paradigm. Those are two. Third paradigm, the non-mechanistic physical realm paradigm. We need to make another contrast in our paradigms. The non-mechanistic physical realm paradigm is one that even some supposed Church of Christ members do not accept. Mechanistic is an adjective. It's the idea of a concept relating to theories which explain phenomena in purely physical or deterministic terms. Someone says, slow down. You're going to need to tell me what that means because I don't get that. Okay, so we'll slow down. One of the interesting ideas about the word non-mechanistic is that the idea is it's not like God just looks at his world and says, okay, I'm going to take a stopwatch or a clock or something and wind it up and just sit back, put my hands back and just watch how it works. He's not apart from his creation. The deist world, the people that crafted the Thomas Jefferson Bible, the Jeffersonian Bible that they give to Congress, voids the Bible of all the miraculous instances in the Bible. They just take them out. That's not the way our God has worked. Now, granted, we should not dismiss God's intervention in the physical realm. We're not supposed to dismiss and say he has no intervention in the physical realm. Providence is, of course, a Bible word and used only once. But we need to know, even though that word's there, take that word out for just a minute so you can hear another point. God does not cause everything to happen on earth. Some things are by man's doing. Some things are by the devil's doing. Yet, some things are by God's doing. Hear how I said that? There are a few things that are by God's doing. God doesn't just wind up a bunch of clocks and sit back and watch us tick till we go cuckoo and then wind us up again. He doesn't do that. That's not God. God isn't like the deist would teach. Deists say God is like one who is some old professor that just sleeps through his students' vitally important lessons. It's basically what they say. God is involved in our life, namely because he says he's involved in our life. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 13, or chapter 12 and chapter 13 talk about the chastisements of the Lord. Sometimes God gives us some chastisements that we need from the Lord. Times to humble us. Humble yourselves under the almighty hand of God so that he may lift you up in due time. He says other things for the chastisements of the Lord are not comfortable or pleasing for ourselves for the moment, but they do yield the peaceable fruit of righteousness when they are practiced and understood that the chastisements of the Lord are from him. So he says he does that sometimes. Other times he says he blesses us. How many times does he say in Matthew chapter 5? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Who comforts them? Who feeds them with righteousness? Who helps them along their way? God? Does Satan bless us with food of knowledge to help us? No, God does. Who gives us peace? God does. Who does the things that help us? God does. Peter and James just also make the observation that the non-mechanistic physical realm paradigm is supposed to be accepted. A non-mechanistic worldview incorporates God and his intervention as reality. It's the way in which we intercept his presence and understanding. It's not like going to Walmart, parking and saying, hey, I got a really good space at Walmart. And look, here's a quarter. That must have been the providence of God. Look at the Lord's providence. It's my lucky day. That's not God's providence. That's not God's divine intervention. Yet on a spiritual plane, if you met someone at the adjoining parking space and they dropped their quarter and you picked it up and gave it to them, and you begin a biblical discussion, God may have chose you, not pre-selected you, but chose the type of person that would exhibit the characteristics of Christianity to display to another soul. You might say, well, God didn't do that because I didn't pray to get that parking space. I didn't pray to pick up that quarter. I didn't pray to meet that person. So how could I be that chosen one? You know, God does what God does apart from what we do. And he chose all of us in a way we'll never fully understand because he chose us before the foundations of the world. He chose all of us as a contingent. And do we understand that fully? Of course not. That's God's realm. That's his part to do. But that will save the lost. That person might decide to become a saint. That person might decide, I just dropped a quarter, and that person picked up the quarter and handed it to me. They could have just pocketed that thing. And now they want to talk about the gospel with me. I want to know who's going to follow their gospel. And then they say, well, it's not my gospel, it's Christ's gospel. And then they're like, well, it's not. Let's talk about that. See how that works is God may have planned for there to be a certain type of people in the world, and you might choose through the gospel to be a part of that plan. Did God intervene in our life? Apart from it and within it, he sustains us. Is he non-mechanistic? Of course. Someone says, well, what does that mean? Define that again. Mechanistic would be apart from his creation, just winding it up like a mechanical clock and setting apart. Non-mechanistic would be involved within his creation, not just being some sort of God of materialistic things, but caring about others and their souls. He cares about us. And a scriptural verse that relates to this specifically is, for the eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and on the good. The eyes of the Lord are in every place. Yes, he sees, he cares, he knows. And the Bible mentions that phrase a number of times. This doctrine doesn't even have to relate to a miraculous nature. It doesn't. But many people want to gut God out of the people he's counting on to reconcile to Christ. They want to gut God out of that. And ultimately, those people are the ones he wants to gain a heavenly reward. If God's wanting the lost to be found, don't you think God has something to do with helping the lost to be found? I think we get that. We aren't deists like Thomas Jefferson. We don't use the Jeffersonian Congressional Bible that removes all miraculous intervention of Christ in the Gospels. Certainly we are in an era where divine miracles have ceased. We get that. We are in an era where there is no more miracles. The Bible is enough for us. Yet some essentially want to live in a Wizzywistic world. They want to say the observable things in life have never any directions from God. They claim we must leave no place for divine interest to intervene until heaven. The non-mechanistic physical realm paradigm is an affirmation paradigm we need to embrace. It essentially says God is still active today. Not only is he active through prayer, he's also allowed to do whatever he wants to do. Once again, it's not attributing every good thing or every bad thing to God. That's just silly. But it is to understand he works within the scenes and not just behind the scenes per se. That's the point of the paradigm. So if you heard all that stuff and got caught up in the minutia and verbiage that was a little bit heavy, focus on this. He works within us, not just outside of us or behind us. Fourth, our scripture reading. Praising God and having favor with the people, the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. You know what Acts 2 does not say? He added to the saved those being churched. Acts 2:47 is a worthwhile meat and potatoes discussion. In Acts 2:47 it says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. It doesn't say the Lord added to their number those who were churched. Once we understand this, we'll do well in our contrasting paradigms. A paradigm contrast is an order, and a number of brethren need this. In fact, it has the mind that we need to look at this very carefully. Our souls are at stake here. The reality is that something that may have been dangerously forgotten in this passage is dangerously forgotten because we focus so much time on chapter 2 and verse 38. We say, repent and let everyone be baptized, and we leave it there and forget to read down to where he says how the church grows is by being added to the church daily those who are being saved. And so we need to recognize that the way the church grows is by gospel, not by churching. by preaching and edification and teaching, not by churching. One of our leading members here, I think it was Troy, I can't remember, but one of our leading members here said, we need to get cards with a plan of salvation on them with many scriptures, and not just hand out these other cards with West Side on them. I like the cards with West Side, very good design. We know that Brent does a great job with that, but Troy, if he was the one that said that, is right. The plan and the gospel is what saves. The gospel is what it's all about. We need both cards. But we also need to look into that, to look at the plan of salvation that helps people gain knowledge about the gospel. If someone's interested in the gospel and are baptized, God does the adding. Souls that are saved because of a response to the Lord and the teaching of the Lord are saved properly. These things which save, and the things which save, and those things that save are due to external church things. External things. They are done by the power of the gospel. For I am not ashamed of the church, for the church is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. No, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for the gospel is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. Church membership is separate and apart from the Lord's adding. Church membership can be denied. There are many instances of people in the Bible, for lack of a better word, being kicked out of the local church. Adding to the Lord's body can never be denied if one is saved according to Acts 2. When one's baptized, they're a part of the bride of Christ, and Jesus only had one bride. Jerusalem didn't want Paul. They didn't want him at all. He'd become a Christian, but they didn't wish to initially accept him. Oh, by and by, he was accepted. Yet he was no less of a Christian in the interim when a church said, well, he's not one we'll accept in our number. So basically what we're saying is he was baptized and became, as back at the first paradigm was mentioned, became part of the universal body. But we don't baptize people into the church, which is a very denominational concept. You can be saved at a Bible study somewhere and then be baptized in a pool. That's perfectly fine. I mean, that's the paradigm working. There's no reason anyone should get some idea that the invitation song is like that's in the Bible somewhere, or that like a bunch of people should come up and tap them on the back and say, now you're part of our church. Well, that's not actually in the Bible in that way. That's a nice thing to do, but no one was baptized to join a church. Never, ever, ever. You don't find someone being baptized to join a church. They were baptized to be added to the Lord's body. Yet, we do know Lydia. We're familiar with Lydia. In the gospel accounts, we learn less of Lydia. We're not told of her. Jesus didn't prophesy about Lydia, but he did talk through her instance of salvation in the book of Acts, which Luke wrote. And Luke said that there was a prayer meeting where the ladies were gathered together at the riverside to pray in Philippi. It was a formal service, and after the service or during the service or some point at a formal service like ours, she was baptized. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm not dismissing the invitation song to say, let's get rid of it. I like the invitation song. I came forward to an invitation song and was baptized in a baptistry. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you were baptized at the time of midnight in a pool somewhere, that's fine too. How do I know that? Because in the very same chapter of the Bible in which Lydia was baptized, the Philippian jailer was baptized. Past midnight, they didn't gather all of Lydia's family and all the people round about that were baptized by the riverside. They just baptized the household and the Philippian jailer, and he was baptized post midnight, probably at either his large residence that maybe had some sort of washing pool, or maybe he was baptized at a bathhouse that was familiar there, or maybe even at a different area like a lake or something. But the point being is, it's not in the sense where you have to be churched to be baptized. The Bible doesn't say the Lord added those who are being churched. The paradigm contrast is needed. It teaches that we're not coming to a worship service to hear how good my preaching is that's supposed to convince you how to be baptized. There's part of it to know that, but the point is whether you hear preaching on baptism every Sunday, or whether you just hear it periodically, that's not the point. The point is the gospel is supposed to cause people to want to be inside this assembly because we've gone outside of this assembly to teach the gospel. I worshiped at one place where there were two individuals with loud voices. They sat next to each other. They were as tone deaf as I had ever heard. One of them could only sing in one key. But you know what? Absolutely everybody liked them. And you know, they were good people. And if they were out of services, I miss them terribly. I miss their terrible off-key singing. I just wished I could be with them. Because they sang out, they made a joyful noise, they weren't doing anything wrong. And because they were obeying God's command, I missed them. And also because I cared about them as them. And I cared about them as them way more than I cared about their voices as voices. They didn't get any flack from anybody else either. None of the other brethren poke fun at them either. If you're a younger Christian or even an older one and you're snickering about how you sound versus how others sound, God can easily make you mute at the drop of a hat in a second for your lack of respect to his principles. If you're of the mindset, you say, well, that'll distract the visitor. They won't hear non-ethereal singing. You're trying to attract the wrong visitor. God adds to the number those being saved, not the saved are added to those being churched. Most people visiting churches aren't visiting for getting a show. They're visiting to show their reverence. Or at least they should be. We should not be coming to a building merely for singing or merely for preaching or merely because, the building's the prettiest in town. To do that is the most sensationally ridiculous type of argumentation. We'd say, if we could just make it look good, if we could just make it look better than the competition, people will come and stay. 3,000 souls in Acts chapter 2 were added to the body, and then 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 more. They didn't even have a building. And to add the more, if we are literally just trying to save souls through technology and facilities development alone, we're missing the point of the major other pillars of cultural and evangelistic and membership development. Yes, they're all important. I'm not going to deny that they're important, but they need to converge to make things happen. And the gospel is about reaching and helping and saving the lost via the gospel. Brethren, we Christians should be and are in the saving souls business, not in the entertainment and creature comforts business. Really. Ask anyone who's visited the castle-like church buildings in Europe. They've been there for years. The buildings are lovely. They're amazing. Yet we've got more members here than in Europe. It was argued by one Christian that just one state in America has more professed Christians than all of the continent of Europe. So no, we don't add to the church in the wrong way. We add to the church in the right way. And the way we add to the church is the way it mentions in Acts chapter 2 and verse 47. It says, praising God and having favor with all the people and recognizing that the Lord added to the church daily those as such were being saved. When someone is baptized, they become a saved soul, and they choose to worship with those keeping to primitive first century Christianity. And on a whole nother doctrinal plane, you don't join a church. We don't say, hey, you're baptized, now go join a church of your choice. We don't do that. The world may say that. The world may have that as their twisted paradigm that we need to very carefully and kindly and sweetly let them know that's not the way it is. God says, once immersed, one is dubbed in the kingdom, thus instantly being in the universal church. From there on, one becomes a worker alongside a group of like-minded souls in their choosing, not arm-twisting at all. Paradigms have a replicating consequence, and the reason that people tend to see things like the permission paradigm as basic is because the permission paradigm is one that runs... they've heard it a lot, and it's the idea of God's authority. But that authority paradigm is very countercultural to the way people in the world are. To view authority in the proper way with a direct command, apostles' example, necessary inference, and the respect for silence, that's different than the way the world speaks, religiously at least. And so that does need to be mastered, and we do need to know how to speak of that freely, but I'm not giving an exhaustive points to that. You've heard many lessons on that already. God's authority paradigm is the permission paradigm. If God didn't give permission for us to do something, it shouldn't be done. That's the answer. If he didn't say yes, don't do it. Often churches talk a big game about authority, only to forget that the lost are unfamiliar with doctrine. To them, the authority paradigm makes little sense. It's foreign to them, and we must repeat the information. It doesn't make it any less true, rather just makes it more crucial that we're fully familiar with the explanation of the doctrinal premises. Well, that's all for the moment. If you want to be a Christian or you've fallen away, in accordance with Acts 2:38, 1 Peter 3:21, John 3:18, Acts 3:37, and Romans 6, and etc., please come forward and let us know your needs as we sing a song the psalmist selected.